What's up YouTube, Jeff back again, and today I'm super excited because I'm going to be comparing the Huawei Mate 20 Pro, which is Huawei's flagship from late 2018, to the Huawei P30 Pro, which I just got in a few days ago. Now if you want to check out my Huawei P30 Pro first 10 things to do video, I will link it below in the description. You can check it out, all the things you should do when you unbox your new Huawei P30 Pro. Now we're going to get into all the differences and similarities that matter between these two devices. But before I get started, let me actually talk about something that people always ask in the comments, and that is about the case that I'm using here on the P30 Pro. This is a case from RhinoShield. It is the RhinoShield Solid Suit case. Talked about it a little bit in the last video. They did send these out to me for review, and I'm a huge fan. This is the carbon fiber colorway. They also have the same case in a pure black colorway, which is actually right here. Very well made cases with tactile buttons, raised up lip on the front. 11-foot drop protection overall. I'm going to drop a link in the description as well as a discount code if you guys want to pick up one of these solid suits or the crash guard bumpers from RhinoShield for your Huawei P30 or P30 Pro. All right, so now let me go ahead and just take off the case here so we can compare the size of the devices. I don't have a case on the Mate 20 Pro. So if you compare the two phones, they have a lot of similarities in terms of the actual body size and style. Obviously, you can see they have two different types of camera arrangements on the back. I'll talk more about that in a second. If you put the two phones side by side, though, you'll notice the Huawei P30 Pro is a little bit taller, nothing you'd really notice in day-to-day use. The Huawei Mate 20 Pro is a little bit thinner in terms of the overall girth thickness of the device. Again, not something I would notice in day-to-day use. And also in terms of the overall width, the P30 Pro is a little bit wider, but again, not really something I would notice in day-to-day use. So if you're really taking size into consideration of the device, it doesn't really matter which one you pick in that particular case. There are a couple of other physical differences that are worth noting though. If you put them back to back, you'll notice that the camera hump protrudes a little bit more on the Huawei P30 Pro. It's a little bit thicker, pokes out a little bit more, so if you sit it down, it's not going to sit perfectly flush, but that is for a good reason, and it does actually have some nice improvements to do with the camera itself, so we'll talk more about that in a second. If you actually look at the bottom of the devices, pretty similar arrangement on the bottom. You do have USB Type-C, you've got your speaker down there. Of course, you've got no headphone jack. Huawei's gotten rid of that quite a while ago. And then on the top, of course, you do have your IR blaster, which is pretty awesome. Huawei's kept that around for quite a few generations. So the size, weight, everything like that, pretty similar. Nothing really to distinguish them or make you pick one over the other. The next thing to talk about is the display on the devices, and the displays on the devices are very beautiful. Both of them are very nice. The Mate 20 Pro actually has a higher resolution display. It's Quad HD, whereas you have FHD Plus on the Huawei P30 Pro. Now in day-to-day use, I don't really notice a huge difference between the detail and things like that, but it is worth noting if you want the higher resolution device, then you would want to go with the Mate 20 Pro, which is a little weird since it was last year's flagship, but Huawei has kept this up every year. The Mate always has sort of the higher resolution screens, things like that, whereas the P series is more of the mainstream, and they try to focus on battery life. Speaking of which, battery life is definitely something you're going to notice a difference on because of that difference in resolution. I do run the Mate 20 Pro and the P30 Pro at their max resolution, but because the resolution is higher on the Mate 20 Pro, I get much better battery life out of the P30 Pro. They have the same exact size battery, but having that difference in the screen resolution does get me an extra hour to hour and a half screen on time. So I'm averaging about 7.5 screen on time in terms of hours on the P30 Pro, which is insane. The Mate 20 Pro, I still get about 6 to maybe 6 hours and 15 minutes screen on time, which is great. But the P30 Pro is just a beast, probably the best battery life device I've ever used in all of my time reviewing, and that's certainly something to keep in mind. The next thing to take into consideration when choosing between these two devices is the camera configuration and the cameras themselves. Now obviously you can see on the back you've got this sort of square arrangement versus the vertical arrangement with the Huawei P30 Pro. There's also a lot of differences that come with this when you're actually talking about the abilities of the camera. The low light photography performance is quite a bit better on the P30 Pro. And of course, the one thing that everyone's been talking about with the P30 Pro is its amazing zoom capability. So you do have the ability to go up to 10 times zoom with this particular device, which is just insane. And it actually works really, really well. Of course, depending on what you're zooming in with, lighting conditions, and all those sorts of things. But overall, I've played around with the 10 times optical zoom, and I've been really impressed overall. You do, of course, have to really, really make sure that you focus in and get the correct point of focus, lighting, and everything like that. But it does work very, very well on the Huawei P30 Pro. Now, the Mate 20 Pro still has a great camera, and obviously low light is still there because you've got night mode, things like that. But the extra zoom capabilities and all the extra little bells and whistles that they put on there with Leica on the P30 Pro is worth upgrading if you are a camera enthusiast. That's probably the biggest reason to pick the P30 Pro over the Mate 20 Pro in my opinion. If you're a camera enthusiast, you're definitely going to want the P30 Pro's capabilities. Next, we can talk a little bit about software on the two devices. Obviously, since they're both Huawei devices, they are both running EMUI. The P30 Pro is running the newer EMUI 9.1. Of course, the Mate 20 Pro will get that soon enough. In fact, Huawei just pushed out some beta testing requests for that. But you have the same sort of gestures, all those sorts of things. Both of the features are the same, private space on both devices. Really nothing to really quarrel too much about. One thing I will say is that the P30 Pro does have 8 gigabytes of RAM on the base model, whereas you get 6 gigabytes on the base model of the Mate 20 Pro. So if that's interesting to you, it does speed up multitasking performance a little bit. So I do think it's worth having 8 gigabytes on the base model. Of course, you can get it in a higher model of the Mate 20 Pro, but you're going to pay a little extra for that. So the RAM is a little bit helping optimize EMUI a little bit, but you don't lose any features. Really, you lose a little bit of the polish, I think, of EMUI 9.1 versus EMUI 9.0. The next consideration is just a consideration that has to do with the physical display, and that is the notch size. So you'll notice the Mate 20 Pro has this much larger notch, whereas you have the teardrop notch on the Huawei P30 Pro. This is something that might matter to a few people out there who really care about the aesthetics of their device. Of course, if you really don't like the notch, you can hide the notch in the EMUI software on both devices. But if you want that smaller notch actually embedded into the display technology and the design, then the Huawei P30 Pro would be the way to go for you. The next thing I want to mention is the fingerprint sensor reliability. Now, on the version of the software I have from the Mate 20 Pro, you can see the fingerprint sensor actual little indicator is much higher on the device, where on the P30 Pro, the fingerprint sensor indicator is at the bottom, just like on the Galaxy phones. Now, I found the fingerprint sensor to be a lot faster and more reliable on the P30 Pro. This could just be because of my testing or the fact that I personally like the placement of the fingerprint sensor, the in-display fingerprint sensor, a little better on the P30 Pro. But I do think it is something worth keeping into mind that they've had a little more time to refine the sensor and also to refine the software that does the recognition. So I think if you're interested in having a more reliable fingerprint sensor and a little bit better positioning, at least for now, probably we'll see that change with the EMUI 9.1 update for the Mate 20 Pro, that you're definitely going to get that on the P30 Pro. It's another reason to consider possibly upgrading. The last reason here just has to do with price and availability, especially if you want to import these to the US. Obviously, the Mate 20 Pro has been out for a while. You're going to find it a lot cheaper, especially if you want to buy it secondhand on Swappa or somewhere like that, whereas the P30 Pro is quite a bit more expensive. Now, if you do want to buy it here in the US, you can get it from B&H Photo, and I'll link it below. They are selling it officially for $899 for the base model. There's also a lot more color options available for the P30 Pro. That always seems to be the case on the P series versus the Mate series. You've got this beautiful Aurora color, breathing crystal, you've got the red. There's a lot of really nice colors for the P30 Pro. So if you're someone who wants one of those exotic colors and doesn't really like plain black or something like that, you might prefer the P30 Pro as well. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed my comparison of the Mate 20 Pro and the P30 Pro. If you did, please like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification icon so I can make future videos like this. Find me at Twitter, Instagram, at the links in the description. Also put any comments below. I'll be happy to get back to you guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks a lot for watching.